use, disengage from the digital world, and then thirdly, the group that never joined in the first place and have no intention of it, and that is a very live group. So let's just have a bit of an idea about where some of these technology have-nots, and will-nots might have emerged from. If we look across the last 100 years or so, we, as I mentioned earlier, have gone through a massive shift in our relationship with information and communication technology. From 1910, 1920, some of the earliest photography and films that were mass-produced, mass-marketed. So we call that the big screen, the silent films in particular. Some of the first films actually have been studied for their relevance to poverty and social exclusion. So some of the earliest Charlie Chaplin films with issues around disparity, social exclusion, marginalization of young people during the Depression. And so the theme of development, really, we can date back to about 1910, 1920. It's not to say that in the 19th century and earlier centuries there wasn't development communication going on, but it wasn't mass media to the extent that it was in the 20th century. In 1930s, we had the age of radio begin, a medium that is really important to me in terms of the work that I've done in the past and how I understand Canada's legacy with the National Farm Radio Forums and how that model went worldwide. So the age of radio in 1930 is important to those of us who work in development because it is the earliest years of using media to overcome social exclusion. So you have some of the first mining radio stations going online in Latin America. You have some of the first Latin American opposition groups and resistance groups using radio to be able to broadcast messages. In the 1940s, we recognized that media took another swing into what we call now big politics media. This was, of course, the era of political propaganda used by both the Allied and Axis forces in World War II. But then individuals like Daniel Lerner and William Shrum, American political scientists and sociologists, anthropologists, looking at the use of political media and propaganda in particular, and starting to say, well, we used it during the war. Let's use these tools of mass communication to get over the war experience and move into a new kind of modernization. So we have the birth of big politics media hand in hand with the modernization project of the post-World War II period. In 1950s, Marshall McLuhan and others predicted that television would change our world. So we went from the big screen to the small screen, the first of small screens. I don't think Marshall at that time, Marshall McLuhan, didn't really know that that was only going to be the first of the small screens. He certainly hadn't seen a smartphone. But at the same time, he did predict something very interesting. He said that the whole relationship between human beings would change because of this box. Because of this box that would bring the world into our living rooms. And indeed, his predictions became absolutely correct. The age of television brought us the world in a way through visual media that we had never seen before. It is the earliest period where stereotypic images of development, of poverty, of starvation, of hunger, of disaster, environmental disasters, were first broadcast, and the impact that had on people's psyche, both individually, as families, again, the boxes in the living room, but also as societies in terms of understanding us and them, the North and the South, the developed and the developing. So television played a very key role in creating often what we now understand to be stereotypic images of development. In the 1960s, a very interesting transition occurred where all of a sudden radio, television, political media could all be converged with strategies to be able to create a new media for development. It was recognized by the McBride Commission and by many agencies at the international level that media was a very powerful vehicle for social change. economic change, political change. And so all of these went hand in hand with strategies that were emanating from the UN system to converge media, to organize mass media so that the messaging could take place harder, faster, more efficiently. And so you had big campaigns at this point that were broadcast not just perhaps on radio, but were broadcast through workshops in development contexts, or perhaps on television screens in North America, to talk about issues like family planning, reproductive health, health and development, certainly social welfare, early programming around poverty and development. And this first generation convergence was pretty sloppy. So what it was the focus was a campaign, a information communication campaign, simply channeled out through many media. And it's what I mentioned earlier about the unidirectional, it was pure information dissemination for development. But what was important was the experience of converging technologies, of bringing together multiple technologies. 1970s, with the age of computer-enabled media, it changed everything. All of a sudden, we could move things faster. We could build faster information flows. And this was coupled with the Reaganomics or the Thatcheronomics. I have to ask somebody if that's a word. In North America, we always say Reaganomics, but Margaret Thatcher was in there too with Reagan. And what happened is the UK, the USA, the big leaders in global media began to consolidate the companies, buy them up, shift them around, cut them off, close them down, and consolidate into what we call now big economics media. So these international conglomerates of media corporations began to emerge. Many of you will remember maybe the very first time you ever saw CNN come on the air. BBC World Service moving from radio into television. Big changes that happened because of these huge consolidations of media firms. And that happened because of absolutely a political decision by Reagan and Thatcher to privatize media, which for the most part prior to the 1980s was made up of a number of sometimes family firms and smaller business enterprises. So the conglomerates, the media conglomerates emerged in the 1980s. 1990s, we have the age of mobile media. Hard to imagine that you had cell phones, but there were actually cell phones. I don't know if anybody owned one, but they were usually about this big, they were heavy, they had this big antenna on the top. They were pretty bulky things, but there was mobile media in 1990. That changed. We've seen a phenomenal growth in the last 20 years with mobile media, and I'll be talking a bit more about what's happened in development with mobile. By 2000, you had about 12% mobile penetration. In 2020, they're predicting 94%. So 94% of the world's population will have access to mobile media. Right now, 2010, I think it's around 40, end of the 30s, 40s. So 2020 is not that far off, and we're looking at absolutely pervasive or omnipresent mobile. And that's related to a new generation, and you often hear this referred to as Nextgen Technologies. Nextgen information communication technologies are based on big and new satellites, which will hover the Earth at a closer proximity. You will see that these satellites will start changing our world of information, communication, and media very dramatically over the next 3 years. So by 2014, there will be 3 of these satellites beamed up or pushed off. And today I heard some news that one of them didn't go too well today. So there was a big $14 billion investment. Whoever had money in those companies might have taken a hit today. It didn't go too well. So one of the big satellites failed to launch today. But they will continue, and there's about 8 of them planned by the 2017 period. So by 2020, we'll have a different type of convergence available. There will be a second generation of convergence. This is kind of like predicting the future, but there will be a second generation of convergence of technologies where we're not just working in the cloud. We're not just involved with cloud computing where our software and all of the stuff that we need to do our daily tasks is somewhere in this weird cloud, and somewhere in the internet. But we will be doing it in very different ways with different types of relationships with our technology. Let me just talk a little bit about what mobiles are. and why they are very, very relevant to development work. The digital development age is a mobile age in the sense that we have many new value-added services that are possible through mobile technologies. So one of them I've mentioned already is that we have phones, so voice applications. We have smarter phones. We can have voice and image, voice and video. It's not just texting, which some people are really good at and some people aren't. It's not just going to be that. It's also the interaction with some of our smarter phones that can literally take what we're doing on a daily basis and upload it to others so they can see what we've just done 5-10 minutes ago. It's a form of mobile edutainment. Edutainment's a word that we use in the field of information communication and extension to refer to processes that entertain and educate at the same time. So learning, but learning very interactively so that we use principles of entertainment and vice versa. So when we are enjoying ourselves on perhaps on social media or perhaps on YouTube, we're also learning something that may help us to do a business, run a business, fill out some forms for the government, you name it. So mobile edutainment will become a new frontier, certainly in the digital development age. Also, location-based services. GPS is just the beginning of it. Online mapping of all sorts, and I'll show you a little later an open source tool that's changing the field of journalism very, very rapidly. So location-based services, photo cameras, or phone cameras rather, not just the holding up the cameras in Tahrir Square in Egypt while everyone is sort of demonstrating and capturing that and posting it on our Facebook, but photo cameras also in the sense of understanding that people can capture day-to-day events in their lives, share that information with others. It may be something like a pest that's infecting your stored grain, having that sent off, having information coming back about that pest and what should be done. So photo cameras being very powerful instruments. Instant messaging, email, and of course, the big one, banking and payments. All of a sudden with M-Pesa, these are words used in Kenya and also in East Africa generally based on Kiswahili words, but M-Pesa and M-Kesho, mobile money. Kesho is a word for tomorrow, and it actually infers savings, like savings and loan, like credit. So M-money, mobile money, and mobile credit, or loans and savings. So M-Kesho right now is a type of bank account that Safaricom, a telecommunications operator, has brought into the Kenyan market to enable consumers to earn interest on as little as 1 shilling. So I don't know what the shilling is. Stephen, what's a shilling right now in Kenya? Is it about 80 to the dollar? So 80 Kenyan shillings to the dollar right now. So customers basically can withdraw money using their mobile device, their cell phone. They can transfer that to their M-Pesa account. So M-Pesa, their mobile money account, is credit on their phone that then they can bounce, people call it bouncing credit, bounce that credit to someone else who has a phone. And you can imagine that you're a young person working in Nairobi, you've got an M-Kesho small loans or credit an account, bank account. You're withdrawing, putting the credit on your phone. You're bouncing it to your relative in the village some 300 kilometers away and asking that to be used as a contribution towards one of your family members' funeral. And that person then takes the credit and either gives the cash to the person, so there is a cash exchange after the M-Pesa's bounced, or vice versa. You could pay debts that are owed to somebody by boosting their phone credit. So all of a sudden, through phones, you have this banking system occurring. It's so omnipresent now. For those of you who work in especially I would say in East Africa, it's very, very popular right now. But across the world right now, it's becoming so omnipresent that the banking sector and the telecommunications sector are having major issues at the national level. They're fighting with the politicians, with the policymakers, because the telecoms have the resources to come in and basically supplant the traditional banking sector, and vice versa. The banks want to get on the telecoms. So there's some really very serious legislative regulatory disputes. As well, as you can see with the advertisement from London, you can receive M-Pesa from the UK. So same thing, you can bounce credit to people's phones from abroad through these accounts.